think about the winemaking, crows are always encouraged and made us walk the vineyards. So, quite unusual, even now for some winemakers, don't actually go to the vineyards. Like the grapes arrive and you make wine.
What does success mean to you?
I'd like to think that, this project ends up being something that's multi-generational. I mean, one of the really wonderful things about making wine in the slate fermenters is, and also making wine from that 1891 block, is that my great-grandfather was there.
Do you like working as a collab?
Yeah, it's great. Well, we make decisions. I mean, at the moment, obviously with the way the wine industry is right now, the decisions are often on the run and it's tough. I mean, it's been tough out there.
Our guest today is Andrew Oxhardy, one of Australia's most respected winemakers and the fifth generation heir to one of the country's most iconic wine dynasties. While Ox may carry the torch lit by his great-great-grandfather, Thomas Hardy, he's also been forging his own path, one pink shirt and slate fermenter at a time. From award-winning vintages in the Clare Valley to leading the charge in screw cap adoption, Ox's fingerprints are all over the evolution of modern Australian winemaking. Today, he's the heart and soul behind Ox Hardy Wines, a deeply personal project that weaves together history, heritage, and heartfelt storytelling from the family's beloved Upper Tintara vineyard in McLaren Vale. But today's conversation is about more than just wine. It's about legacy, reinvention, risk, and forging your own path. Andrew, welcome to Tales from the Top.
Thank you very much, Joe. Lovely to be here.
Great. Right. Okay. We'll get straight into the questions. The hard ones first. So essentially, let's start with your story. Where'd you grow up? And what were the early influences that shaped you sort of in and out of the vineyard?
Yeah. We grew up in the eastern suburbs in Leabrook, just up in Max Cooper's old house, actually, so up the road from the Cooper's Brewery. Dad bought that house in 66, I think, 65, and we moved there. And so I grew up in Adelaide. The headquarters for Hardy's at that stage, where Dad worked, was Mile End, the old Mile End cellars, which Thomas Hardy had built back in the early 1900s. So Dad worked there. He was managing director and production director of Hardy's. So we were city slickers, really, but we always had the vineyard. So the vineyard was Upper Tintara, was bought by Thomas Hardy, my great-great-grandfather, in 1871 and passed down through our side of the family. So Lower Tintara Vineyard, which is still owned by Hardy's, by John Hardy, that passed down through his side of the family. So we always had the vineyard. So it was always a place to go and ride motorbikes and hang out and, run around and be idiots, which was great fun.
That would have been a little bit, I think that'd be more relaxed and more fun than having to run the business side of it. Yeah. So that was a, we sort of grew up around the place and grew up in the winery as well. So Dad was, even in those days, he was 7 days a week for a lot of the year. Production, that was where all the bottling was done at Mile End. So it was a hub for all the wineries. All the wine came in from all the other Hardy's wineries. So we were in the winery a lot and in the vineyards. And of course, it was the days when you went and had a barbecue at the vineyard and your parents got pretty well, they had a few drinks and then you were piled in the back of the station wagon. There was no such thing as seatbelts and you all rolled home. In the FB Holden.
Yeah. So we had that time we had a V8 Valiant station wagon that my Uncle Tom had ordered new, and Dad bought it for Mum when Tom ran out of patience with it. But that was pretty cool too.
I reckon the AP6 was the first of the V8.
This was later than that. This was a VE, I reckon.
A VE, yeah, right.
I think it was a VE.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
It was a good car. 318 V8. No, 360 V8 had the big motor.
Right. No mucking around then.
No mucking around. No. Cool. And it had a bullet hole in the had a metal roof rack, and they used to go shooting. And Bill Hardy, my cousin, must have let one off, and it went right above the driver's head, right through the rail. So
you should have tried a bit harder.
Yeah. A little bit dangerous. Yeah. Safety first. Yeah. When you're shooting from the back of the tailgate down, with the tailgate down.
Let a good whistle as it goes along.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So
yeah, cool.
So when did winemaking become your path?
I guess sort of growing up thinking, I always thought I want to be a winemaker. Then Mum and Dad took us to England for Christmas for one of our aunties. In 1977, and we went to Geisenheim, and I thought, I'm in Germany, I want to go and study at Geisenheim and do the winemaking course. That was my dream. Yeah. Anyway, got back and decided I want to be a farmer, so I went jackarooing. Right. Went to Adelaide Uni and then dropped out of that after little while, and as we were all want to do, and then went jackarooing in New South Wales. And then one morning woke up and said, no, I want to be a winemaker. So
to go back to jackarooing, explain to people that aren't from Australia what that is.
Oh, jackarooing is so basically slave labour on a station. So we weren't paid very much, but it was great fun. So you learnt, you were a labourer on a big sheep station. We were sheep, cattle, and cropping, and so we were jackaroos, sort of the nearly the bottom level of workers on a station. So it was great fun, great learning experience. Riding motorbikes, horses, driving tractors, learning how to shear, all that sort of stuff.
Yep. So how many would be on a station? I guess a station was just a farm.
Yeah, it's a station. Yep. We were 2 jackaroos at that time, and a station manager, and then we had a bit of labour that came in and helped when we were really like shearers and all that sort of stuff when we were very busy. But I really enjoyed it. I really loved it. And I wanted to be a farmer, but anyway, the lure of the grape got me in the end. So came back to Adelaide Uni and kept going. And then I decided that I didn't want to be in South Australia anymore because...
Today's episode is sponsored by us, Chiron Audio and Devison Design.
At Chiron, we enrich people's lives with music systems that create lifelike three-dimensional images that evoke real emotional responses and allow true connection to recorded music. With our strategic partners, we can help you create the ultimate environment to enjoy your Chiron music system. From interior design guidance through to an entire bespoke listening room, we can assist you to bring your dream to life. Life is better with music, and music is better with Chiron.
Devison Design creates luxury garage environments for the discerning automotive collector, preserving your collection in surroundings that are more gallery than garage, and so enhancing the value of your enjoyment. With projects across Australia and Europe, Devison Design provides design services worldwide. Truly bespoke garages start with inspiring designs. Let Devison Design inspire you.
To get in touch with one of our principals directly, visit our website, chironaudio.com.au or devisondesign.com.au to book a consultation.
And now on with the show.
Back then in the late 70s, it was, you had to get into Roseworthy to study winemaking, you had to either be a family member or already in the industry. It was a
bit of a closed shop.
It was a bit of a closed shop, and I thought, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So I enrolled at Wagga Wagga. Back then it was called Riverina College of Advanced Education. It's now Charles Sturt Uni. Mm-hmm. And I went and lived there for 3 years, studying full-time with a bunch of really funny people. And then got a job at Petaluma in end of 82. So I was up here at Piccadilly. So I was there for 36 years.
Wow. Wagga Wagga wouldn't have been that big in those days either. It's quite the city.
It was quite a big, I think it was 50-odd thousand still, because remember, Wagga had the big Air Force base there.
Army base,
yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a regional centre. So it was...
Did you serve there?
Oh, I spent plenty of time there at the RAF base and the Army base.
Yeah. Oh, it was good. It was a good town. And we were, at that stage, that was 82, 81, I think, when I got there, 82. And they still offered the full-time course there for winemaking. So there were about 20 of us, 25 of us, that had lectures every day, and it was proper university.
So what year are we talking?
I think I got there in 81. Mm-hmm. And, or maybe 80. Studied 81, 82, and then came back to, I started at Petaluma in November 82.
Was that like the pinnacle moment of the wine industry in Australia, where it became where the people who were going to work in the industry weren't just born out of the industry, actually went to university and did a course, and it started to become that's the way to do it. Yep. Was that the beginning of that time?
I think it was probably Brian Crozer set it up with the late Dr. Tony Jordan and Ron Potter, who owned A&G Industries in Griffith. They were the three main movers when it all happened. Crozer was working for Hardy's. He came back from California. He'd been studying at Davis University and was poached basically and set up the course with Tony and Ron. And that was sort of the beginning of, like, it took the level of education up to university. So Roseworthy was a college, and it was fantastic, but it wasn't a science degree. Whereas Crozer and Jordan thought it's got to be a science degree because there's a lot of science involved. So that was the beginning of that, another formal education unit that really worked, and it got people from all over. If you wanted to be a winemaker, it didn't matter whether your name was Hardy or not. You could you go to university. So and it was a lot of people were working, either dropped out of work and came to uni, or then we all transitioned into part-time studies. So you go back for residentials. So you get a job like I did at Petaluma, and for 4 or 5 years I kept trying to study, just distance study, but that is not easy.
Did they treat you differently at university because of your name?
Yeah, I suppose in a way, they all called me Jim because Jim Hardy was obviously the most famous Hardy they'd heard of.
Yeah.
So my nickname at uni at Charles Sturt was Jim, but no, not really. I think we're all pretty laid
back.
But in Adelaide, there would have been a lot of sons of.
Oh yeah, it was,
and how many women, many girls doing that course?
When I started at Wagga, we probably had five or six girls in full timers. So there was quite a few.
So it's a lot of offspring of winemakers.
Yeah.
So being a Hardy was like just being one more of one of the gang.
Yeah,
yeah. Okay.
And most of the people that were there studying when we were there were already working in the industry or had started working in the industry. Yep. Couple were sons of a bloke called Ian Lehman, was the son of Phil Lehman, who'd made not the Lehmans from South Australia. It was Leamo.
Oh, okay.
And they had a winery at Bendigo. So there were a few of those, but most of them were kids out of Sydney or kids out of Rutherglen or wherever. Right. So it was good.
Are the courses as good today as they were back then?
I think they're very good. I mean, when you go to uni now, Charles Sturt or Adelaide Uni, you're doing a university degree really for the first 2 years,
right.
And then you start properly specialising. And Wagga was like that. Wagga was like a first year science degree when we were doing it. I think Roseworthy wasn't quite that level. Roseworthy was still much more of a ag college.
Yeah.
But they quickly changed the way they're doing things. So it became a much more scientific degree. As Adelaide, if you do enology now, the first 2 years is at Adelaide Uni,
right?
And you go to wait a bit, but I think it still is based at North Terrace, and then you move out to wait for final years.
Excellent. So we finished college, and then we.
Well, I didn't actually finish until much later. I started work at Petaluma in November '82, and as I said, I kept trying to do distance studies. So for a few years, I struggled on and did the resis, and sort of got halfway through the course, and then I just dropped that. Anyway, and in '89, Dad just said to me, "You need to finish your degree." So I took a year off work, got leave from Petaluma, and just went back to Roseworthy, and I did a year and a half in a year.
Wow,
which was pretty cool.
That's all right.
Amazing when you got a bit of motivation.
Yeah. Get back to earning.
I had 3 kids, and we had our 4th kid while I was at Roseworthy.
Oh, wow!
Okay.
And I was commuting from here, from Aldgate, Cricklewood Road, to Roseworthy. So it was an hour commute every day.
Yeah,
it was great fun. Loved it.
So how old were you at this time? So now you're.
So I was 28 when I went back to Roseworthy.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I was then studying with a whole lot of. I called them kids because they were 18.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were straight out of uni, out of
school.
High school. So I've got all that group of winemakers that I knew from Wagga, and I've got the next set that were all from Roseworthy. So that was really good.
Yeah. So you just touched on family, so maybe that's a good one to go on to. So there are a couple of there's so many big questions about the. Recently, we interviewed David Brabham, and probably a very similar story, both from big family heritage in the chosen fields, and coming from champion bloodstock. We won't cross over to Phar Lap, of course. That might relate back to Ox, I suppose. But how do you create your own identity if you've got all of that history? How have you managed to keep your own identity to yourself?
I think a lot of it was to do with Brian Crozer, that his mentorship and his when I started with him in '82, he was the young Turk of the industry. He was the go-to guy, and he empowered us. Back then as kids, we were kids really. When you think back on it, to seek it out and say, I don't care what your name is.
Good.
You got to work. You got to be like everybody else and fight for it.
Yeah.
And I think Martin Shaw was my immediate boss, and then Crozer. So Martin Shaw was Brian's winemaker, and Martin and I were only a year apart in age, and our parents had been friends but we didn't really know each other that well, and he's become one of my greatest friends. So we were just told, think about the science, think about the winemaking. Crozer always encouraged and made us walk the vineyards. So, quite unusual, even now for some winemakers, don't actually go to the vineyards. Like the grapes arrive and you make wine. So that's sort of the norm. Whereas Crozer said, if you want to make wine, you've got to understand the vineyard, which means you've got to walk the vineyard.
Yeah.
And you've got to walk it all through the year so that you know how the pruning's happening and you know why you're pruning it that way, right through to the picking decisions of saying, tell me what you're tasting when you're walking with him, and making picking decisions based on that. So I think that was the great thing, that that's a great learning experience. And he's a great teacher, Crozer. So it was and it was great fun too. We had a ball.
So the way a vine is pruned can actually change the way the grapes grow, or
So it changes. If you prune very heavily, you're leaving less buds, so you get less fruit. You leave more buds, you get more fruit. You then tread the fine line between what the canopy might look like, whether it's too crowded, so you're going to promote mildew growth, or whether it's too open that you're going to get sunburn. You're weighing all that stuff up, and we were growing grapes here in Piccadilly, and Brian had only just planted Piccadilly. And we're growing grapes in Clare. We're making Riesling up in Clare, or bring the fruit down, and we had Coonawarra as well. So we were 3 regions for Petaluma, which was, and they were very different regions. So our vintage started in Clare and finished in Coonawarra. It usually could have been 10 weeks of just flat out picking.
Goodness.
And in those days, it was all hand picked. I mean, a lot of it's not anymore, but in those days, it was all hand picked, so it was relatively slow.
Yeah. So what classifies as vintage? Everyone, I hear about my my winemaking friends, and you just don't see them for a period of time.
I've just come out of hibernation.
Right. Well, we tried to get you here and back early March, and it was, don't talk to me. No, I'm picking grapes. It's vintage.
Vintage is so that it's an interesting question, because when you think about the Southern Hemisphere, our vintage in, let's say, South Australia, because that's where we are, normally is, if you go back in history, would be March and April, and some in Coonawarra sometimes into May. So that's when you're picking. That's when the grapes are coming to ripeness, and you pick and you make the wines. Nowadays, with climate change, everything's got that much earlier. So we're getting bud burst earlier. We're getting ripening earlier. So we started this year on the 6th of February, which is earliest in my 40 years. It was nuts. I mean, mental, but turned out to be a wonderful vintage. But so we went from 6th of February and we finished last Monday. So it's still a long period, but it started so early.
But that's just all hands on deck for
basically, pretty much. Yeah, our vintage these days is a lot less hectic than the old days when we were. I'm in the business I'm in. We're only doing a fifth of what we used to do at Petaluma, so we're much smaller. So the Petaluma vintages were really intense and great fun, and took a lot of beer to make all that wine. We were the biggest Heineken outlet in South Australia.
So you did some travelling after this too, didn't you? Because you went to was it Kaiser Wines?
I went to
Bordeaux?
I went to Simi in Sonoma Valley in 1985. Did a vintage there, and then I went to Oregon in '88, which is a winery called Argyle, which Petaluma ended up owning half of. And I've done 2 vintages in Bordeaux, 91 and 92, the 2 worst vintages in memory.
Wow.
Rained the whole time. So I helped a Finnish guy build a winery there. And then
helping him pack up because it all failed. And
no, he's still going. He's still going, believe it or not.
Okay. Right.
He hired another friend of mine, Mike Simons, took over from me when I finished doing it, and then who's also South Australian. And then Mandy Jones from Rutherglen went and worked for him for 10 or 15 years. So it's had an Australian influence on in Bordeaux all those years. I'm not sure who's making the wine. I think his daughter's making the wine now.
Is it a different experience making it over there? Like, do they have a different approach to here? Or?
Oh, look, we're all. I mean, at the end of the day, you want to pick grapes ripe, and you want to make like the process is conversion of grape sugar to alcohol, and then whatever you manipulate around it. So, and we're all the same, that we talk about terroir, and we talk about what that part of and so the differences we saw is lovely, because we were dealing with, not in Bordeaux, we weren't dealing with Chardonnay, but we had Semillon, Sauvignon Blanc, and Cabernet and Malbec, and so the varieties we use over here, and you're dealing with a different in a different part of the world, slightly different winemaking techniques. I mean, we all got our own little small secrets, but it's pretty standardised. You're doing the conversion of grape sugar into alcohol.
What about the culture of the people? Is it different in California to here, do you think?
I think wine people the world over are pretty similar. I mean, we all love. I mean, I think we all love drinking wine.
Yeah,
and we all like we all love the vineyards. So I think that culturally, other than just a normal culture thing, differences between Americans and Australians and the borderland Australians, that's a normal sort of a thing. But I think we. In Bordeaux, they love to go shooting. They'd eat birds that big, and these tiny little robins.
Yeah, right.
Spit out the shot. Yeah. You don't see so much of that over here.
Well, you'd only be using a 410 on those poor little things.
Yeah.
So I think the whole notion. So we've got some education. We've got some transition over to the foreign climes to pick some things up. So recently you've moved away from, and I was talking recently, is in this last decade, you've moved away from working for others. Tell us about your transition to Oxhardy Wines. How did that come about? What was the catalyst that actually either finally made you do it or got you there?
I think it goes back. Dad and I, back in the late 80s, made wine from. Back then, the vineyard was all machine picked. The old vines. We've got a block that's planted in 1891. Back then, the vines are all machine picked, and I said, "Dad, let's make a bit of wine off the vines on the end of the rows that get missed, that the machines won't pick."
Yep.
So it started out as a hobby that I just made, typically 50 or 60 dozen. That was all, so a small amount, just for fun, for him to drink, basically. And I made a Shiraz and a Cabernet.
So 50 or 60 dozen was enough for you and your father to drink in a season?
You don't want to drink it all the time. We gave a lot away as well. And then I sort of kept doing that right through until I kept going right through the 90s into the noughties. And then I kind of got serious in sort of late 2016, 2017, started thinking about not being at Petaluma anymore because we'd been taken over again. And I wasn't particularly enjoying, when you wake up in the morning and say to your wife, I don't want to go to work, you got to change.
Yeah.
So that's when I pulled the pin. I resigned, and that was 2018. And an old family friend, John Hesketh, had been pestering me. His father was a friend of my father's as well. He'd been pestering me for a while to do something with a label. So
why did it take you so long then?
Well, I did present my father with about 10 business plans while he was alive, saying, we should do this. I'd really like to do a label with you, Dad. And, we should do it from the vineyard. The vineyard's been in our family, since 1871, all those things. Yeah. It'd be fun to make wine, yada. Anyway, he just refused. I think he just didn't want to do it. I think he was burnt out with the BRL Hardy, with the Hardy's takeover.
Yeah.
Our family company Hardy's got taken over after the State Bank crashed in 91.
Okay.
We were a victim of that. We had to pay back our loans that we'd been expanding dramatically. And I think Dad was just disillusioned and didn't want to do it. Anyway, I pestered him long enough, and he finally said, "We can do it when I'm dead." So when he died, I did it.
Did you ask him how he was at the time? You feeling all right?
So it took me a while, but I stayed on at Petaluma. So I was at 36 years at Petaluma.
Yeah.
And then 2018, I pulled the pin. I had 2008, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 in barrel or bottle. So I had all those vintages of the ancestor vine with no label. They were just bottled with a clean skin, with a screw cap, clean skin. And we thought, let's do something. And so there we were. We just got cranking, designed the label, and off we went.
And you launched this in COVID.
Just as COVID hit.
Excellent.
Really good.
Yeah.
Really great planning.
Yeah.
How do you plan for COVID? But at that stage, we had no customers. So there was no, you heard a lot of stories during COVID about wineries doing quite well because they sold a lot, but they were wineries that were already in the market and people knew the name. This is brand new. Yeah. And, it wasn't on any shelf anywhere. So the brand existed in family and friends for a number of years. And once COVID finished, Negociants, right from the beginning, Negociants Australia is a part of Yalumba, and they're distributors. So they distribute a lot of wine domestically in Australia. They're fantastic. They got behind me right from the beginning and said, we'll distribute your wine.
Right.
So we've got national distribution, which is good. We've got people on the road all the time. Obviously, they're selling a lot of other wine, but they're also selling off.
How did you keep the lights on during COVID? If family and friends only go so far.
That didn't pay it. So when I left Petaluma, I joined John Hesketh, who I mentioned before, and Dale Wyman, and they owned a business called, at that stage it was called WD Wines, and they had Parker Estate at Coonawarra, Vickery Riesling they'd started, which is Clare and Eden Valley, and the Hesketh brand, Johnny's own brand, and another brand called St John's Road out of the Barossa, which Dale owned. So I bought into that business.
Right.
And that's now called the Usual Suspects Collective.
Oh, hence you remodeled it.
Yeah, hence me. So the Usual Suspects Collective.
Okay.
Basically, I came on board with them as a shareholder, and also I'm in charge of viticulture and winemaking for the group.
So your product, so Oxhardy Wines is part of that.
Yes. So
Right,
I rolled that in.
Okay, that makes
So
sense.
that's part of the deal. And I have an exit clause. We have an exit clause that if for whatever reason the three of us aren't getting on, which won't happen, but if it did, I can get it. I've got a mechanism to pull it out, and vice versa. They can pull. So,
do you like working as a collab? Is that?
Yeah, it's great. We make the decisions. Yeah. I mean, at the moment, obviously with the way the wine industry is right now, the decisions are often on the run, and it's tough. I mean, it's been tough out there. But the three of us are making the decisions. We have a board, obviously, that we run stuff past, but it's good. They're both, they've both been in the industry. John's been in it nearly his whole working career, and Dale's been in it for 20 years.
Yeah.
So
you'd much prefer to do that than work on your own. And
it's one of those funny things. If I, had my time again, you'd probably say, well, it'd be fun to do it on my own. But really, Johnny and Dale presented an opportunity that allowed me to do it, and it wouldn't have survived.
Yeah,
I'd be driving a truck.
Yeah, right.
I reckon, because that wouldn't have done anything.
A wine truck, though.
A wine truck.
Yeah. Wine truck.
There's power in people, right? I mean, that's the thing.
And also that the business was already running, so that the labels Parker Estate, Vickery, and Hesketh, the three bigger ones, was already up and running. So the back of house stuff for me was all the things I don't want to do, which is organised distribution, all that logistics, all that stuff. I want to make wine.
Yeah.
So that's allowed me to do that, and the offshoot is that I'm still getting to see Clare Valley, Eden Valley, Coonawarra, Adelaide Hills. Whereas if I was just doing Ox, it would be I shouldn't say just McLaren Vale, but McLaren Vale.
So how was the transition from employee to boss?
It's always I think it's quite difficult. You've got you're used to having a guaranteed paycheck every month. That's and all of a sudden you're in a much smaller business that nothing's guaranteed.
Yeah.
So been a good learning curve.
Yeah. And supportive family as well.
Georgina's very good. I mean, I can't believe she's put up with me all these years. Yeah, she's very good.
Yeah. Say all the right things.
It's funny.
Shout out to Georgina.
Yes, and thank you very much. I think that's probably one of the comments that we get a lot is, and I know I can say that about my wife as well, after 30 years this year of marriage. The things that have happened, the success I've got is essentially it's a team effort because I couldn't have done anything that I've done without her absolute support and her wisdom and guidance, and also that from friends. I mean, Lee and I have been friends for 10 years now, 10 years, and
a married couple.
Yes, purely platonic, of course.
I get that.
Yeah, purely platonic. But
when our kids were young, I mean, it's interesting when you now look at our kids that are having kids.
Yeah,
the way they parent is completely different from what we did. I mean, I went to work, and Georgina stayed at home and looked after the kids.
Yeah,
and most of the time, I was gone before they got up in the morning, and they were in bed when I got home at night.
Yeah.
And nowadays, my sons and daughters their partners are totally hands on. So it's no.
Yeah.
So Georgina did all that. I mean, and I travelled a lot in the days of Petaluma. I was 1 year I was away 8 months.
Right.
So combination of overseas and domestic selling. So I'm out promoting.
Yeah.
And she put up with all that and brought the kids up.
So you brought up family. Tell us about. So you've got how many children? What are they doing?
2 boys and 2 girls.
Right. What are their ages? What are they doing? And who's in the wine industry and who isn't? And who's going to take over?
There's only one in the wine industry, Henry. He's our third child. He works with me now in the business. He's sales manager for all the brands, so he's got a big role. So he's the one. Robert is the next one up. Is a farmer who lives out at Dorsley. Got a fencing business amongst other things. So he's peripherally, he's doing a bit of work for us at the vineyard, actually, doing all our fencing down there.
Handy.
So he's very handy. I don't get a discount, mate. Right. No family discount. But I know the job's good.
Yeah.
You know you're getting a good job.
You've got a number to call anyway.
Yeah. And then the two girls are consumers.
Yeah, right. Okay. So between them, at some point, they're all making a contribution to the family business,
and they're good promoters. I mean, the girls promote. Emily, our oldest daughter, lives up in northwest of Brisbane, and she promotes the brand to all and sundry. So that's fun.
Nice.
Very good. So Henry's going to be. Any interest for him in making wines?
Yeah, he did. He's done a vintage at Argyle in Oregon. He's done a couple of vintages at Petaluma, the old Petaluma. He did a vintage at Peter Lehman, was his first one up in the Barossa. So he knows the ropes, and and I think he probably wishes he had done winemaking, and he did wine marketing at Adelaide Uni. So he's the sort of the one that will take the label over, if you like, and oversee. He'll be able to oversee the winemaking without, maybe physically doing it, but.
Here's a big philosophical question.
Oh, God.
That's all right. You can all.
What's more wine?
Well, maybe I should save it for the next. University qualification over a 4 or 5 year apprenticeship traineeship in winemaking. What? I mean, we know that's probably where we all start, where everyone started out in the 50s, the 60s, up until then. What are the advantages and disadvantages of one over the other, and should we go back to in the field learning under apprenticeships? The reason why I ask that, my youngest son just graduated today from university. He's got his parchment, so that's great. It was a great day, and there were 17 million kids. They're all getting their parchments. It took hours for them all to go through, one every 10 seconds, but still took a long time. And some of these degrees, I think there was some interpretive dance in there, and I think I just starting to, and please everyone forgive me, but I say this unashamedly, I'm not sure I understand the value of some degrees. That's my humble opinion. So what then is the value of a university education over hands-on in the field training under a winemaster?
I think they both got their place. I think, we that had done the degrees would always say that one of the intangibles is the networking you do when you're at university, and the people you meet, and therefore when you come out and you all spread wherever you go, you end up having a network of friends, probably from all over the world. And in fact, with Petaluma, when we were at Piccadilly, the people that came through, the young winemakers that came through Petaluma over the 20 odd years. Whether it was there, they from Barolo, from Bordeaux, from California, from all over the world. So the alumni of Petaluma is a bit like the alumni of university. That it's really spread. So, but I think also that you can. There's certainly no doubt that there's a lot of very good untrained, if you like, non-qualified winemakers out there that do it by the seat of the pants. That's fine. The science behind it is, if you've got a struggling fermentation or all that other stuff is quite important. I think it's maybe not the most important, but the fact that you're made to think doing a university degree, and you're made to think about how a grapevine will react if you do this, and you're making what will a ferment do if you do that, and then the law of thermodynamics and all that stuff. It's all what happens if you chill a ferment down too far? Will it get going? And all that. That's all. You can do that seat of the pants as well, but if you've got the background science, then it can be. So
you're getting a deeper, more fundamental knowledge base before you actually get into the field and start making.
And we used to have Saturday mornings at Petaluma in the old days. Brian would be down there. We'd all go into, all the young winemakers would go into work, and we'd shoot we'd just talk. And we'd talk about all sorts of stuff, but the depth of stuff, the depth of knowledge you got from Brian, talking about whatever we were talking about in winemaking terms and viticulture was fantastic. And you might not necessarily get that if you weren't thinking, not necessarily scientifically, but certainly analytically.
Yeah.
So here's the qualifying question now. Are we making better wine today than we made in the late 1800s?
Yeah. So the wine quality in Australia now is stupendous, really. I mean, and we do have a bit of a bit of culture shock because people still keep looking at, for instance, everybody talks about Chablis, which is Chardonnay from the Chablis region. We shouldn't talk about that in Australia. We should talk about how good the Chardonnays are. Chardonnays in Australia are outstanding. Yeah. So the wine that we make now, it's not to say that there weren't great wines made back then, because there were, and some of the great old, especially reds of the 1940s and 50s that are still intact.
Well, so makes you wonder then on that comment, where is Grange now? Where's Grange Hermitage now relative to what it was like? If what you're saying stands true, it's better today. Is a Grange Hermitage from the 30s an inferior wine to the Grange Hermitage they're making this year? I won't say this year, but this year.
The first was 51. I think that's a hard question because
51,
51. That's a hard question because it's a style. Grange is a style of wine, and it's always used mainly Shiraz, often with a bit of Cabernet in it. I think to say are they better now than they were then, possibly. I don't know. It's hard. It's a bit like saying is Max Verstappen a better driver than Juan Manuel Fangio? How can you compare?
Yeah, very true.
It's chalk and cheese.
Yeah.
We'll go back to Oxhardy for a minute. Can you two things that stood out for me when I was reading into it was 130-year-old vines, which is, I don't think there'd be too many Australian wineries that could boast that, and slate vats. So could you talk to those for a bit?
Well, the vineyard, Upper Tintara vineyard, the oldest, the old block is 1891. So it was first planted in 1863, the whole vineyard. Mm-hmm. And then for various reasons, a lot of it got pulled out over the years. The one block that's remained, the 1891, is at 2.5 hectares, 2.54 hectares. And that's remained because it makes good wine, the wines, just because they're old doesn't mean they're going to make great wine. That's right. the first thing. But so the old vineyards that have survived, the various vine pools or drought or lack of, Shiraz went out of favour, et cetera, they've survived because they make really good wine. So that's the first thing, which is, you've got to sort of say, right.
How long can they live?
Well, I don't see any reason. I mean, this is, as you said, 1891, so they're 130, I can't do my maths now. Anyway, 130 odd years old. Yeah. And they're still, we hand prune them, hand pick them. So they're treated like dear old people.
Well, you can't get machines through those old ones either, can you? They're not
well, you break too much stuff. Yeah. And you can, because the trunks are very convoluted, you can actually break the trunks.
Is it, the distance between the vines different as well? Can you get your machinery down?
Yeah, they're big wide rows. Okay. It's planted on the contour, so the contour of the hills. Mm-hmm. As most of the vineyards in South Australia were planted on contour back then. But think about when it rains. Yep. If the rows are going straight down the hill, the water's going to go straight down the hill. Yep. They're on the contour. The water as the rainfall falls, it goes down like that.
They transverse to the slope.
Yeah. So those older vines, though, is it? I mean, obviously, terroir's used a lot in describing it. Is it because of the length of the roots? They get longer as they go.
Their roots, and so for most of their lives, they were dry land. They were not irrigated. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of vines did die, because if they had the 1895, the Federation drought, for instance, 1895 to 1912, yes, it did rain a few years in there, but it was basically bone dry for 17 years,
right,
give or take. There were a couple of wet vintages in there. So a lot of vines would have died back then. And, it's like people planted, because you think about going back into the 1800s, they were mainly Englishmen or a few Germans up in the Barossa, but they were using knowledge that they brought from home, from the other side of the world, or they didn't have any knowledge and they were just having a crack.
Well, wait for it to rain.
Yeah, wait for it to rain.
It's November. We still haven't had it.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think that's the good old vineyards have survived. And there's 5 wines in McLaren Vale that are identifiably a wine made from 1800s vines. So there's Ox, Paxton, K Brothers, Richard Hamilton and Darrenberg. There's 5 wines that are labelled that we know come from 1800s vines.
Wow.
Now, we know there's probably more down there, more 1800s vines, but they're not necessarily going, they're probably, it's being blended away. So we're hoping that we're going to find another one, because if we had 6 wines that you could do a 6-pack.
Yeah, you
nice.
could. Yeah, yes.
Doing a 5-pack doesn't.
The holy
kinda,
double trinity. Yeah.
So there's, and we know there's old Grenache down there. We know there's my cousin John Hardy's got Sauvignon Blanc on Lower Tintara, and that's 1885. So that's seriously ancient.
So we need a little bit of viticulture
I can't
archaeology.
even keep a house plant open for a couple of weeks.
Yeah,
Well, my poor son Seb, he got couple of plants to put in his office down at the uni, and they're all dead.
Yeah.
They all started looking very, very bad. I said, "You need to drink more wine. How's it going to look after my plants? It'll just make you care less about the little plants." So you brought some wine.
I think that there's no reason we haven't had, touch wood, we haven't had phylloxera in South Australia, which was the louse that attacked vines all around the world.
Yeah.
In the 1890s was when it was dramatic in Australia, when Victoria got nailed, but in the 1870s, 1880s, the phylloxera killed vines all over the world. Wow. And
so our isolation has helped us there.
we missed out in South Australia. Didn't miss out. We managed it not to get it in South Australia. And Thomas Hardy, my great-great-grandfather, was on that original board that set the phylloxera board up. He was one of the proponents to say, we need to keep South Australia isolated. Hence our rules about quarantine.
Yeah.
When your wife
still
stops on the
very
side of the
strong.
road in Victoria and wants to bring the seeds in, I get absolutely furious.
Yeah.
We have massive arguments about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, it's something pretty special. If we got phylloxera here, those old vines they're all on their own roots. So what they worked out in the 1800s, the American Vitis was not attacked. Vitis rupestris was not attacked by phylloxera, but Vitis vinifera was, which is the European vine. So they actually grafted vinifera onto rupestris rootstocks. So we all grow on rootstocks, and those rootstocks are. They can live with phylloxera, whereas ours can't. So if it got in here, most of Coonawarra would be, and that's 60 kilometres away. There's phylloxera from Coonawarra.
Wow.
So Coonawarra would be wiped out. All these old vines would be wiped out. I mean, if it travelled, it's a big bow, because you got to drag it in on your shoes or on a tractor or on a ute.
Yeah. I mean, biosecurity has just transitioned in the past probably 10 years. I remember going up to spend. We went up to the Clare Valley last time was only 12 months ago, so we're due another visit very soon. And driving around, there's the big change in all of the biosecurity access controls for virtually everywhere is huge now. And I, growing up out around Victor, and then growing up living in the Fleurieu Peninsula in Wollonga. There was nothing. It was simply a 3-strand barbed wire fence. And if you wanted some grapes, it was just, you didn't pinch them, of course, because that'd be like cattle rustling. So I'm sure some people did, but I mean, so there was very little control. And even, going through Piccadilly, if you want a couple of apples.
Yeah, you just jump the fence.
You just jump the fence. Or you just walk over, because there is no fence.
No fence,
Yeah, there is no fence. So tell us, you very kindly bought some wines tonight. We've been drinking the Fiorano. Tell us what you bought and what are we drinking?
The Fiano is 2024. That's Italian white variety. We planted that in 2010. We had Chardonnay on the place, and nobody really wanted McLaren Vale Chardonnay anymore, because everybody was coming up here to the hills, or going to Mornington, or going to Tassie, or going to Margaret River, wherever. So McLaren Vale Chardonnay kind of fell out of demand. And I said to Dad, we need to rip it up and plant something. And we did a bit of a search around the world, thinking what would suit McLaren Vale, suit the climate change. We know the climate's changing.
Yeah,
we won't argue about why it's changing, but we know it's changing.
Yeah.
And I said we need a variety that will hold its acid. And I wanted to do another white. I said the vineyard's mainly red, so I said we need to do another white. And Fiano popped its head up as it's drought tolerant. It holds its acid, so even in the hot summers, it's got wonderful acid, and it's very versatile. I make this quite reasonably simply. It's not much, a little bit of oak, but mainly tank fermented. It's that lovely crisp light.
It has a really nice
Sea salt and oyster shell, and it's really, really lovely.
See,
crisp
that's
white.
pretty artistic. Sea salt and oyster shell.
Yeah.
I would have said that was quite nice. And asked me, I would have thought maybe a glass full of sunshine with a little bit of bubble, and then I get kicked out of the wine club.
I have to admit, it's quite intimidating. Like as a I enjoy wine, but I can't talk about wine, well. And what's your advice to people that, especially younger people, because it can be an intimidating drink to get into once you've gone past coolers of beer. So, and
a cask at the pub on after the pub on a Saturday night. And
So what would your advice to be to a younger person that's like wanting to get into wine?
I guess one of the things with and going back to the education piece was one of the things we were taught to do at university in wine college was talk about the wines. So you would encourage, nobody's wrong, nobody's right.
Yep.
You're encouraged, hey, Lee, what do you think about the wine? And you say, whatever you say,
yep.
You're not ridiculed, you're not put down. If you make a mistake and you say it, it's clearly white and it's actually a red wine, then obviously you're going to get picked up on that. But we were encouraged to talk about wine. And then, again, at Petaluma with Brian Crozer, we were encouraged all the time to talk about wine. So when you had a wine, you were absolutely encouraged and almost forced to say something about it.
Mm.
And as I said, nobody's right, nobody's
so
wrong.
It's
What your taste is. Yeah. And then I think so for kids getting into it now, hopefully the
above
best
18.
Thing, above 18. the best thing is write stuff down, or even if you're in your phone. In the old days, we used to write a note in a notebook.
What, with a pencil?
With a pencil, yeah.
Wow.
And just write, the name of the wine and 2 words or 3 words, and that makes you jogs your memory. So when you look back on that, you go, I had that Oxhardy Fiano, and I like the sea spray. Mm-hmm. And whatever it might be,
but and the oyster shell,
and the oyster shell. But I think that's the point of it's a little bit of rigor saying it's not just a drink. And wine is not just a drink.
Yeah.
I mean, it is, but it isn't. Yeah. It's interesting to talk about if you've got not bore people endlessly, but it's interesting to talk about. And I think that's more to the point of saying, join a wine club, get a group. If you're at uni, get a group of mates together and do a wine tasting once a week or once a month, whatever it might be, and then write the things down and taste them blind, so that you got a wine master in the evening. It can be fun too. It doesn't have to be a wine wank. It can be fun.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, you'll get the crowds who don't understand, and they'll have an introduction which has left them a little bit not understanding. So they'll ridicule some of the poshness about it. But at the end of the day, wine is the thing of life that is that is part and parcel of existence in a very organic way, and it's connecting us to the land. It's part of the land. It's not doesn't have to be overly sophisticated or clever or anything. It's simply culturally correct for pretty much wherever you are.
And it has done for thousands of years.
Yes,
not a couple of hundred years, thousands and thousands of years. Yeah. So it's been part of people's lives in certain parts of the world.
I mean, the Fiano didn't I read that actually is partially connected to grapes that are a couple of thousand years old that the Romans used to use as well. And there's I can't remember the name.
Most of it goes back. If you trace it back, and there's a quite interesting study being done at the moment by Australian Wine Research Institute, and they're doing a genetic study on DNA study on the old vines. So that's in it. So they've taken material off the vine, and they're doing DNA testing because they want to try and find out. We don't really know where that came from. I mean, we suspect where it might have come from, but did it come with MacArthur? Mm-hmm. Did it come with the first fleet? Right. So we're going back that far. So they'll cross-reference all the old vine stuff they can find with known old vines in for instance, the Hunter, where they know they came from. They came from MacArthur, or they came from Busby's collection, or they came from wherever. So that's going to be really fascinating to see where, hopefully it will show us where they actually did come from, because, I know that Tom Hardy originally, they travelled, and amazing when you think in the 1870s, 1860s and 70s, they were travelling overseas in a ship
Yeah.
and going on study tours.
Yeah.
You know, that was part of what they did back
Yeah,
then.
for 3 months and trying not to die of scurvy.
And he came back through, one of the stories is he came back through Chateau Kemin, which is the most famous Sauterne producer in Bordeaux, sweet wine, one of the greatest wines of the world. He came through there and took cuttings and brought them back to Australia. So one of the stories is that the Sauvignon Blanc we have on our place and my cousin John Scott originally came from there. So this may or may not prove that. We won't let that get in the way of the good story anyway.
No, exactly.
The truth will never get in the way of a good story.
It must be processed to bring in, like, was that brought in from overseas? That
The Fauno originally was, yeah. So that's quarantine. A good example, Peter Barry from Jim Barry Wines in Clare brought in, he was on holiday in Greece, liked the Sertico, which is a native Greek variety, liked the wine, thought, wow, this is working Clare. And it took him 5 years of quarantine to get enough material to actually, because you don't know what bugs you bring in.
That's right. You explain what's at stake.
Biodiversity is, so it's quarantine. So to bring new cultivars in is very, very strictly controlled. So it's not just a matter of saying, bang, I'm going to do it.
Can we go back to my question from about 10 minutes ago, which was about the slate vats? Can we can we touch on that, please?
Sure. So there's a wine that we make, Oxhardy Slate Shiraz. So it's called that because it's fermented in slate fermenters. So going back to the history, the vineyard was first surveyed in 1861, planted in 1863, and Dr. Kelly, who was one of the founders of Australian wine industry in South Australia, built a winery there in 1863, and two houses are still standing, and was building his own house. So we've still got two of the original houses from 1863, plus the ruin of the winery. And there's 5 slate fermenters that are still standing that were built in 1863, and they were used from 1863 to 1927, by which stage Tom had bought the main street of McLaren Vale, which is now Tintara, which was a flour mill. He bought that, and he bought the pub. The pub we still own. My brother and sister and I still own the pub. It's kind of nice. But the winery is now Hardy's Tintara. And so he had 2 wineries at McLaren Vale, our little winery at Upper Tintara and the main street. So he ran them both from when he bought the main street in 1876. He ran them both from 1876 to the last time our place was used in 1927. And then it fell into disrepair. So the building was there, everything was there. We got photos of it in 1953 when Hardy's was 100 years old. They had a big party there. You could still see the building. And over the years, because nobody cared about heritage. You think about heritage in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. We didn't do it. No. I mean, that great hotel, the South Australian, was knocked over.
Terrible.
Yeah. House of Chow.
Exactly.
Sunday morning.
Just
get rid of it.
Yeah, get rid of it.
Yeah.
So our old winery fell into disrepair, but it was still, anyway, long story short, I always said to Dad, where did the winery go? Because the walls were 2 feet thick, ironstone walls mined locally on the place. The mortar made out of mud in the creek, mud and stones in the creek. So where did the building go? Anyway, Dad never told me. He either didn't know or he'd forgotten. And I was having lunch with Mark Maxwell, who's another winemaker at McLaren Vale, and I was telling him the story 2 Christmases ago. He said, I know where it went. Well, tell me. So actually, when he finished school, at the end of each school day, he went and carted rocks from our winery to Wirrawirra. So Greg Trott. Oh, right. So Wirrawirra is a lot of the walls at Wirrawirra are mine. Yes. So
get them back.
I've told the current managing director, Matt Diller, hey, I'm coming back to get it, mate.
Climb the hill.
So that's where I went.
Church block, it will be no more because there'll be a resident.
So then I've still got these 5 slate fermenters still standing, and the walls are 2 inches thick. The base is 3 inches thick. Yeah. I've got to convert to anyway. Sorry, I mean, old man. They hold about
75 mil.
Yeah, they hold about just under 4 tons of grapes. So we started again in 2018. So they hadn't been used from 1927 to 2018, and then since 2018, I've been making 2 fermenters each year of the slate Shiraz.
Yeah,
and there's something weird about it. I mean, it's one year I fermented a stainless fermenter next to it of about the same volume, same way I did it. Everything was identical. Kept the wine separate right through the process into barrel, and they're totally different. So there's something happens in the slate fermentation. It's an open fermentation. There's no power there. It's all I hand plunge it 3 times a day.
They're outside, aren't they?
Outside. We bucket it in. We bucket it out.
So we'll show some images of that we'll edit them in. Otherwise, we're going to be. But we'll definitely edit those in.
I've got a couple of lids that my farm manager made that we put on at night so that a fox won't go in or a kangaroo won't go in.
Yeah.
But otherwise they're open.
Otherwise you'll have to do you have to do the 2026 possum blend.
But there's something happens in the fermentation while the juice is fermenting and with the walls. So there's an ionic, I think there must be an ionic exchange.
Yeah.
That the tannin structure is very different in that wine than it is in the wine that goes through the slate. Now,
because you have thermal differences as well.
Differences. Well, it's almost a perfect fermentation. It has been every year we've done it. It's been almost a perfect fermentation. It sort of takes a long time to take off, then it takes off, and the temperature gets up to about 30 and then drops, which is about what you want. You want to hit a peak, which is pretty much.
And it's also on the land, so you've got a thermal transfer from the land and up around here. We're all the ground temperature is always sort of around about that 12 to 15 degree mark. And then you've got slate on top of that, and the 75 mil or 3-inch slate wall is probably going to slow down. It's going to hold a temperature range, and it's not going to be affected by the vagaries of day to day. So you've probably got some consistency there.
Can I ask a nerdy question?
I'm doing nerdy talk. I love my nerdy talk.
How do you seal it?
How do you what?
How do you seal it?
So the walls and the floor, where the walls and join the floor, we use beeswax. So we just paint melt beeswax and paint it on just to strip that wide. Yeah. And then the rest of it's just slate. Yeah, cool. And that works. That's what they did in the old days. Yeah. You know.
In Wollonga, there is a slate house in St Andrew's Terrace, and it's got a rainwater tank out the front. And I used to live in that street. Yeah. And it was my first house I bought when I was in my 20s. And I would walk past, and they've got it's a timber frame home. And then the slate panels make the walls, and there's huge water tank out the front. It's held together with steel rods on the outside of the backs, and incredible because that thing's going to be there for another 100 years.
Well, that's what our tanks look like. Our fermenters look like. Yeah. So they're held together with steel rods. Yeah. And our slate came from Delabole and Bangor, the two quarries in Wollonga.
Yeah. So we've got a water tank just out the front here in the car park, and you probably nearly ran over it, which is a stringy bark tank, and it's held together with straps. So this cottage that we're in today is one of the oldest in Stirling, and that water trough has been there for probably 100 years, and it's falling apart. I might have to put some oil on it.
Yeah. What do you love about winemaking, and what don't you like about winemaking?
There's not much to not love about winemaking, especially if you're involved in growing the grapes, and you're doing the whole process, and then you got that wonderful period of the lead up to vintage when you're looking at what you've been doing all year, from pruning on, if you like, what the season's been like. You're thinking about the season, you think about whether we had any rain, in the lead up to vintage, and then you've got that wonderful period of excitement while you make your decision. And remember, we got one chance because if you stuff it up,
what's the decision?
When you pick. If you muck that up, the wine, you can't
vinegar.
You can make a wrong decision on picking, and you can either pick it too ripe or pick it underripe, and you're not going to make decent wine. So there's that nerve-wracking, great fun part of it, right? And it's also logistics. When you're thinking, well, where am I going to put it all? Yeah. You've got to find a tank to put it in or a fermenter to put it in. So there's that logistically, it's challenging and fun. And then you get to see it all fermenting, and then you get to see the end product. And for instance, this vintage was, because it was so early, when everything's wrapped up, we'll do our sort of classification tasting, if you like, in May, where we'll just go through every wine we've made and be critical about. And we have I've got 2 winemakers who work for me, and my 2 business partners, and Henry will be in it this year. So there'll be 7 of us tasting and talking and canning if they need canning. So you're super critical about saying, well, that's not
canning.
Well,
I was going to say,
nailing.
What's canning?
No, nailing. Just saying, it's no good.
Oh, right.
So we don't hold back. We don't pull punches.
Sure.
So that's nerve wracking.
I was concerned he was going to put wine in a can.
No, there's people doing that. There's it's quite popular. Turkey Flat are doing Turkey Flat rosé in a can, and I think it's gone nuts.
I was probably a little bit concerned when we went from cork to cap. And I believe that you're partially responsible for that. So I've got about 14 really nice corkscrews I'd like to talk to you about afterwards.
Well, that's bad luck for you. Just keep buying wines with corks in them. What I don't like about it, probably, there's not much. I think that at the moment the wine game is tough. That's not much fun. The perfect storm of China and COVID, and it's made it really tough. And also now, when you think about the world population, they're drinking less. So the 18 to 25-year-olds are not drinking much wine anymore. Mm-hmm. They're just not.
They're not drinking much of anything anymore.
Much of anything. They're happy to pop a pill and go to a party.
Yeah.
But health-wise, they won't drink alcohol. So what we're seeing worldwide is we're losing. So if you're being totally terrible, you're losing 7 years of drinking, which is, which I know is a terrible thing to say, but that's kind of the way you look at it. So they're not drinking beer, they're not drinking spirits until later, and then the world population is increasing, but most of the world population increase is in people that don't drink. It's against their religion.
Right.
So we've got a bit of a double whammy, and then also there's too much wine. We all planted too much all over the world. So Bordeaux, Bordeaux's busy pulling out 10,000 hectares at the moment, even in Bordeaux.
So how do you win?
Pardon?
How do you win? How do you get ahead as a business making wine?
Well, I think our wine industry in Australia has to contract back to a smaller base. So, you don't like pointing finger at anybody, but when you think about what where the big tonnages are in terms of tons of grapes, it's South Australian Riverland, Sunraysia, MIA. It's the irrigated regions, and there's a lot of wine being made up there that hasn't really got a home. That's got to change. That's not to say there's not some great wines made up there. There are some really good wines made in those regions. But at the moment also places like Pathway, Rattenbully, Coonawarra, everywhere really people are pulling vineyards out and either replacing with things they know they can sell, like spuds, onions.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
Because there's water down there, so there's plenty of water. And then also saying, well, do you know what? This vineyard was planted 30 years ago. The varieties are wrong. We're going to pull them out and replant with varieties that suit. So there's a really big realignment of what's happening in the industry of what we actually need, and we have to get back to what we need. So some of the industry estimates are that we need to lose a third of all the vineyards in Australia.
Do you think we're going to stay niche? Are we going to keep the niche top quality, and we're going to lose the big corporate vineyards?
We have to keep the niche because we can't compete on the big end of town. We can't compete with Spain, Chile, Argentina, Italy on the cheap end of the spectrum. They've got labour advantages, let alone California. But so I think we have to concentrate on quality, and it's smaller wineries, smaller wine companies with stories, and that really do talk to. You bang on about terroir, but that's where it's got to be. It's got to be stories. It's got to be wines that people want to drink. Relevance. I don't think there's. You think about the wonderful thing that is Barossa Shiraz, that wonderful segment. Yep. It's still huge. It might not be growing, but it's still huge and it's wonderful. And you open a bottle of Barossa Shiraz, and they're wonderful wines.
Yeah.
So I think we need to. We all need, and I think, as I said, with Bordeaux pulling out varieties, they're saying we don't need the Mouton Cadet end of the market anymore. We need the Mouton Rothschild and the top end. And even they're even struggling because Cabernet is a difficult sell. But there's a lot of challenges.
So you've managed to silo your business, though. Like you said, there's not a lot that you don't like about it. So are you just doing the bits that you do like? Is that how you've managed it?
Sadly, not sadly. I mean, I still really love travelling and talking. So, and there's one way to get your story across, and that's actually be in the market and get your wine into people's mouths. So we're all doing more of that. And when Australian wine really took off in the late 80s in England, it's the first when that export boom happened. Jacobs Creek was one of the first that's when that Jacobs Creek went through the roof. Yep. And I remember Bob McLean, kept saying, who worked for us, worked at Petaluma, but also was St Hallett in the Barossa, said, you just got to get out, pound the pavement, put your Aaron Williams on and knock on doors and have bottles of wine with you and pour them and get the wine into people's mouths. If you can get people to taste it, as long as the wine's sound, as long as it's good wine, they'll buy. So there's enough people in the world that still want to drink wine.
It's like Chiron speakers. Once they hear them, it's like your years of designing and making fantastic stuff. Once they listen to it.
I was going to say there is some the parallels, especially in the luxury market.
Yep.
It's the same thing. It's just be the best.
Yep.
That smaller volume, be the best.
There's wonderful anomalies like champagne where that's been so driven by celebrity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the occasion. I mean, Champagne's done a wonderful job marketing over the years. But,
every single boat, every single ship.
Yeah.
If they can break the bottle.
Every Grand Prix they spray.
Yeah.
So you notice the Cabernet King. Where did that name come from?
I don't think I'm those. Well, when I was at when I was at Petaluma, when we floated the company in 1991. We bought Tim Knapstein wines at Clare as part of it to make the package acceptable to the market, to the share market.
Yep.
And when Tim Knapstein decided in '95 that he wanted to pull out, didn't want to be part of it anymore, and I said to Crozer, I'd like to go and run it. If I can go, I'd like to go up there and run it. Leave Piccadilly and go to Clare, which was part of Petaluma. So I went up there and I ran the vineyards for the Petaluma vineyards for Petaluma and the Knapstein vineyards, and we ran the winery and did a pretty big rebuild on the winery. Anyway, I made a wine in 2000 that won a big award. Was the best Cabernet in the world in a big competition, which was bloody good for Enterprise Cabernet, which is good fun, good prize.
That's amazing.
Got a great trip to California for 10 days and stayed at Stag's Leap, and so that was a bit of fun. That was good.
It can't hurt for the marketing side of things.
No, it did. It was not a bad thing, actually.
So we probably should talk about the branding as well. Coming back onto the business side of things, you've obviously. Now, I did read somewhere that there was a bit of always a risk putting your own name on wine, but also the political distancing from the Hardy's brand. I mean, obviously there must have been some issues there, or were there issues there? I mean, how have you challenged that?
Ox is my nickname, so that's I've had that since grade 5 at school.
Yeah,
and they can't stop it. Hardy's couldn't stop me using Ox Hardy because it's my name.
It's your
were
name.
you called Ox?
I was tall from age in grade 5, and I barged through a pack playing basketball. Nice. And one of my mates said, "You bloody great Ox," and it stuck.
Yeah, right.
So I'm Ox to even all my grandchildren call me Ox. So,
nice.
Yeah.
That's great.
So it's easy rather than being Pa or Granny or whatever. Anyway, so I didn't really ever get any objection.
Great. That's
Jeff Hardy, my cousin, he's got wines by Jeff Hardy. Yeah. So I think if you're using your name, it has. On the other hand, it has created a bit of confusion in the market when you go into a new market in, let's say, North Queensland, and they go, "Well, it's just Hardy's, isn't it?" And then you got to do the explanation, and within if you haven't got them in 30 seconds, you've lost them anyway. Yeah. So you got to try and get them and explain. So,
but your branding is also. I mean, it's the branding is great. Tell us about the branding. I mean, the colours.
It stands out. I think the pink Ox Hardy bit is because Georgina, my wife, used to dresses me in a lot of pink shirts. So that's where the pink came from. And the other colour labels are the slate. Obviously, is a grey slate colour for the slate fermenters. The Fiano is Hyperion Azzurro, which is the colour of my Ferrari.
Right.
Now I'm being a wanker, aren't I?
No. There are other names for that.
Yeah, the blue of the Shiraz is Dad's Austin Healey, which I've still got. And then I did have another couple of wines, but so there, other than and the black is just because we wanted black for the ancestor vines.
Yeah. Nice.
So it's always if I release a new one, if I decide to release a new one, I can buy another car.
Let's get on to cars then. So you like your old cars?
Yeah, I do.
Tell us why.
Grew up with a father who was who loved winemaking but loved cars as well. So he'd for instance, his first car was an MGTC back in 1949, and then he went to
that was brand new.
Yeah, brand
49,
new. Yeah. Then he went to England in '53 and picked up a Austin Healey from the factory, 104, and drove that round France with a mate of his, Henry Martin from Stonyfell, Stonyfell Wines.
So 53 was a BN1.
BN1, yep. So the Austin Healey I've got is the same as that. So
Right.
Dad and I bought that in 1989. It's same car. He only sold the Healy when I was born. He had it from 53 to 61 when I was born, and then obviously Mum and I wouldn't fit in the Healy, so he bought a A95 which had a Healy motor in it.
Yeah.
So Austin A95. So I sort of grew up around cars with him, and there was a wonderful form of motorsport back then called mud plugging, which was basically, do you remember mud plugging?
I
Basically,
know what that is.
it was, you're in a paddock, you're timed through a course that's set out with flags, down through creeks, up through wherever, in what would probably be called jalopies now, but were open wheeler cars. So they were, Dad's was a Holden FJ motor with Holden running gear and mud, big fat mud tyres.
Yeah.
So it was, nowadays you wouldn't be able to do it because the greenies would say you're ruining the countryside.
Yeah.
But back then it was a safe,
sport. Yeah.
great form of motorsport. And so I grew up around, Dad always had one of those, me growing up, and then he got in, had a couple of Bentleys, we had 3 or 4 Bentleys, old Bentleys, Mark 6s, and then so I guess I just grew up around cars, and I was car mad from an early age.
Yeah. That's not a bad thing.
No, it's good.
Yeah.
It's good. The only problem is, of course, now if I buy another car, the proviso is that another rock goes on Georgina's fingers or another. So it costs me approximately double. Whatever the car's going to cost, I can double it.
One for you, one for her.
So,
One for you, one for her.
yeah.
Lovely. Look at the face.
I just felt the disturbance in the force then. That was palpable. I think we need to open the slate. I think we need to talk about it. No, we want fresh glasses.
That's
That's all right.
I'm not that fancy.
I think we still need to open it. I mean, it'd be rude seeing Oxford with you.
What's your favourite car in the collection then?
I love the Ferrari, and it's one of 147 right-hand drive manual 6 carburetor cars, so it's quite a rare, and a lot of them are gone. A lot of them have gone to God, or they've gone to rust, or they've gone to they've made specials out of them.
Specials, yeah.
They make a lot of specials out of them.
250 GTOs.
Yeah, so I love that, and
It's a lot of carbies to tune.
it's got to go to a Weber specialist any day now, actually, because it's not running quite right.
That's the Colombo V12, which is just a magnificent V12.
Beautiful
It
motor.
just sings.
And it sings. I mean, it really does sing.
Yeah.
But it's got a bit of and the trouble with 6 Weber carbies is you either chase the carbies or you chase the distributor or you chase is it the spark plug? Anyway, we'll get to the bottom of it. But
hang on, I want to get back into that because
there's a lot to
wine
anyway,
and carburation. There's not a lot that you need to do.
Well, while we enjoy
Yes.
our wine, should we ask a formative question?
Oh, the big question.
Yeah.
Are we at that point? It feels like
the big
we've only just
question. That sounds ominous.
All right. Well, hang on. I'm just going to get to it so I don't get it wrong. Well, look, at the end of the day, the big question we ask is you've had success. You're doing things that are just quite that people like to have in their storybooks. But what does success mean to you?
If you're talking about the wine brand, it would be
you, the person.
Oh, I
you,
think
the person.
I think I'd like to think that this project ends up being something that's multi-generational. So one of the really wonderful things about making wine in the slate fermenters is and out of the, and also making wine from that 1891 block is that my great grandfather was there.
Yeah.
And although the line got a bit broken with not using that winery and obviously history, people didn't care about heritage. The fact that I'm now doing it and it's continuing that on a much much smaller scale. That's I think the having the next generation involved is. I mean, it's great with Henry involved now, and the kids and the other kids all love it as well. But it'd be nice to think that that's going to keep. It won't end at 6. It might go to 7 or 8 or 9, hopefully. So that's success. And then for me, that's success. That's where I want to. That's where I want to be. And I think if in the long run, if we're using all the fruit from that vineyard, that would be great. But on the other hand, if the brand is good enough that it's supporting itself, that's great. But I think that succession thing is pretty neat. It's great cool. Fun having Henry back in Australia, and he can. We do stuff. We do. I work with him, but we do tastings and stuff together with the public, and he can fill in if I can't do it. He can go. and he talks with the same. When he was at university, Dad had gone blind and couldn't drive anymore, and still wanted to go down to the vineyard. Not completely blind, but he couldn't drive. And Henry used to take him down a couple of times a week. Dad would pay him for pocket money for university. And Henry's heard stories that I haven't heard from Dad. So a grandfather will tell a grandson stories that a father will never tell a son. So Henry's got stuff. He's got backstories that I don't even know, and he's told me some of them over the.
Well, then maybe he needs to come here next.
Yeah. So it's that's fantastic to have that. To have that continuity is pretty special.
That's a nice success story. So, look, thank you so much for joining us, and I think we should drink a toast and say thank you again, and to family and heritage.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. And to the listeners, I hope that you enjoyed that as much as we did. Thanks for listening to the show. And if you'd like to find out more about Chiron Audio or Devison Design and how we can create bespoke luxury environments and experiences in your life, you are more than welcome to book a call with one of our principals through our websites, chironaudio.com.au or devisondesign.com.au. Many thanks goes to our producer, Marcus Franks, and our editor, Jeremy Devison. Make sure you hit subscribe, give us a 5-star review, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next episode. Please take the time to leave us a comment, and we look forward to seeing you next time on Tales from the Top.